I had taken a nap one weekend afternoon. When I woke up, I got it into my head that I needed to take a little hike. I didn't know what time it was, and I really didn't care. I just needed a trail beneath my feet. I went to college at a school near the mountains. There were several beautiful canyons only a few minutes away, each of them densely forested, with a mix of evergreen and leafy trees. I picked one and headed up to a familiar hiking spot. I planned to take a trail that I knew well. It snaked back and forth through a side canyon until it reached midway up the mountain. At that point, the trail ran alongside a cliff. The cliff was at least 100 feet tall, and the trail hugged the cliff for a couple of miles before it snaked down a hillside at the other end, safely away from the cliff. I never completed the loop. Just getting up to the cliff was good enough for me. I was not a fan of heights, and I did not find walking alongside a killer cliff to be very thrilling at all. I came upon a fork in the trail where the Riverside Trail and the Side Canyon Trail split. I had never taken the Riverside Trail before, and I was feeling spontaneous, so I took the Riverside Trail. It was a very beautifully shaded trail. I walked a couple of miles along it when I came to another fork in the trail. The right fork finished the loop on the other end of the cliff. I did want to hike to the top of the cliff, and here was my second chance to do it. This trail wound side to side up a very steep hill. I made it to the top of the cliff, and to my surprise, the sun was setting. It was hours later in the day than I thought it was. Oh well, where better to watch a sunset than in the canyon? Besides, there would be a lovely full moon that night, perfect for night hiking. I watched the sun slip behind a mountaintop to the west, and then I got ready to head back down the trail. There is a strange thing that sometimes happens with hiking. Sometimes it is easier to go up than it is to go down, and sometimes it is easier to go down than it is to go up. I found myself in just such a situation. In the failing light, I couldn't see the slope well enough to navigate it. Every time I tried to go down, my feet started slipping on the gravel, and I would head toward the cliff right next to me. I tried several times to figure it out, but no matter what I did, I kept slipping toward the cliff. I did not want to die trying to get down that trail. Exasperatedly, I started heading my way across the cliff trail. Who in their right mind built this thing, I wondered. It meandered right next to the cliff over and over again. It was getting really dark really quick. I decided to stop at a little wash on the mountain. The snow had melted away a long time ago. The little wash had filled up with leaves. As I waited for the moon to show up, the crisp fall air began to get bitingly cold. I was wearing nothing but shorts and a t-shirt. I did not expect to be spending the night up in the canyon. I had learned some basic survival skills growing up. There's nothing better than a pile of leaves to keep warm under during an unexpected night in the cold. I could barely still make out the leaves in the wash, but I could see them well enough to dig into them a little bit. I dug myself a little hole. I got myself situated, and then I covered myself beneath a good layer. I laid there for about 10 minutes until it got completely dark. I was actually beginning to feel warm. Suddenly, I felt a little bug crawling on my arm. Think about something else, I tried to say to myself. I felt another little crawly on my ankle. I was already seriously questioning whether I should be laying in these leaves when I felt a big something crawling on my leg, and it was headed up into my shorts. Nope, I ain't doing that. I jumped out of that pile of leaves, and I frantically wiped off every crawly spot I could feel. I was on my feet. I was back in the cold. I was on a trail next to a cliff. I had to start generating heat somehow or I was in trouble. There was nothing else to do. I headed down the trail. I used to go to scout camps as a teenager. Back in those days, flashlights died quickly, which left me in the dark on the trails. I learned to feel my way down the trails in the dark, and by the end of the week, I could navigate those trails easily in the dark. Hiking next to that cliff, I knew a couple of important things. First, the cliff was to my right. Second, the trail just loved to veer right up next to the edge. I stuck to the left side of that trail as desperately as I could, and I made my way as slowly as possible. As I made my way in the dark, I began to see a very ghostly glow to the right side of me. I could barely make it out, but it was definitely there. I stopped walking to see what it was. Across the canyon, the south-facing slope dimly reflected the light of the moon. I looked to my left, and I couldn't see the moon. It had to be behind the mountain that I was standing on. Well, I realized something though. If you're going to go night hiking, pick a south-facing slope. I kept going, but not for long, when I tripped over a tree root. I fell to my knees and I screamed into the darkness. I had no idea where the cliff was. All I knew was that I was grateful to have hit my knees on the ground. I got back up on my feet and kept going, but to my absolute horror, I tripped 2 more times. Twice more I landed on my knees, and twice more I could have scared people down below. From all the screaming that came out of me, I changed the way that I was stepping so that I could feel the roots before I tripped on them. It was a little slower going, but not by much. I don't know how long I walked like that. I stopped hitting the ground with my knees. That had to be a good thing, right? Well, I really thought so until the next crazy thing happened. As I hiked in the darkness, a tiny light appeared in front of me. It looked like a street light from very far away. It definitely caught my attention, but I didn't think that there were any street lights like that up here. Not that high up anyway. I had seen the lights from the cars trickling through the trees as they drove at the bottom of the canyon. There had maybe been a handful or two of those. This light was definitely stationary, and I was walking toward it. I watched the light curiously as I walked, but as suddenly as it appeared, it disappeared. I was amusedly confused, but I didn't worry about it too much. A little while later, though, the light reappeared. I walked toward it for a few minutes, and it disappeared again. After the light did this a few more times, it started getting weird, like uncomfortably ghostly weird. I kept going, and the light kept appearing and disappearing. But over time, the light began to grow in size, and it took a larger and larger circular shape. It appeared and disappeared a few more times, and it was taking the shape of a really large, round tree. At this point, I stopped walking and I looked behind myself. There was nothing but darkness. I looked forward at the tree again, and I literally thought to myself, did I fall off the cliff and now I'm walking toward the light? In some really strange, heavenly, inside joke sort of way? Alive or dead, it didn't matter. If I was alive, I had to keep going. If I was dead, though, what other option did I have? Can you just not walk toward the light? It didn't seem threatening at all. I couldn't think of a reason not to walk toward the light. I took a deep breath and I kept going. The tree reappeared and disappeared several more times, and it just kept growing dramatically in size. The individual leaves began to appear, and they shimmered with a silvery bright, ghostly light. It was by far the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life. The tree got so large and so bright and so beautiful that it became the only thing that I could think about. I didn't feel the cold anymore. I didn't feel the trail underneath my feet anymore, and tears were streaming down both of my cheeks at the majesty and stunning awe of this overwhelmingly lovely tree. I was so close to the tree that I thought I could reach out and touch its leaves, and just before I reached my hand out to do so, I took one more step forward, and a really bright object appeared at my left. I turned my head toward it. It was the full moon hanging there beautifully high in the sky. I looked down at my feet, and I could see the trail. I looked back up at the tree. Its magnificent, beautiful glow had disappeared. Instead, it reflected the moonlight in a ghostly, pale sort of way, just like all of the other trees that suddenly surrounded it. I finally understood why it kept appearing and disappearing. I had been going in and out of little side canyons, and I didn't know it. Now, I was standing at the end of the cliff, attached to the large side canyon that I usually hiked, but had chosen not to take earlier that day. I wiped tears off of my face, and then I headed down the trail in the large side canyon. I made it back to my car well past midnight. That was not at all how I planned to spend that evening, and yet I have never seen anything more beautiful than that moonlit, drenched, glowing tree. And as stunningly beautiful as it was, I knew that I would probably never see it in that particular way ever again. The only reason that I could see it like that was because I had wandered desperately for hours in pitch black darkness. I couldn't tell if I was alive or dead in that extremely unusual moment, and the only way to recreate that experience was to do it exactly the same way I had done it the first time. I had risked death far too much for my liking the first time anyway. I could not consciously put myself in danger like that again, but to say that that memory is soldered into my brain, that is a greatly exaggerated understatement.